For as long as humans have been around, there's one question that has just echoed through every civilization, every religion, every late-night talk. It's probably the biggest mystery we'll ever face. So today, we're going to look at that very mystery, but through 3 totally different lenses.
What happens to us after we die? I mean, really think about that. What happens to our consciousness, to our memories, to our sense of who we are? It's a question that really gets to the very heart of what it means to be alive.
So look, we're not here to give you the single final answer. Instead, we're going to take a journey together through 3 major ways of thinking about this mystery, and each one offers its own fascinating clues.
We're going to start with what science can actually observe. Then we'll shift gears to what different faiths believe, and we'll wrap it all up by exploring the deep questions that philosophy asks. Ready? Let's get into it. Okay, first up, the scientific perspective. Now, science is all about what we can observe, what we can test, and what we can measure. So, from that point of view, what exactly is death?
Well, biologically, it's a pretty clear chain of events. It all kicks off when the heart stops beating. Once that happens, blood stops flowing, which means the brain gets starved of oxygen. And it happens fast. Within just a few minutes, brain cells start to die off. And since our consciousness, our thoughts, feelings, everything is generated by the brain, this is the point where, scientifically speaking, consciousness is lost for good.
So, if you're looking at it from a purely scientific standpoint, the conclusion is pretty stark. After we die, we feel nothing. The biological machine that's required to produce any kind of feeling or thought has just shut down. The program is ended.
But you might be wondering, what about all those stories of near-death experiences? People seeing a tunnel of light, feeling this incredible peace, or even feeling like they're floating outside their own body. So how does science explain that? Well, the scientific take is that these aren't supernatural events. Instead, they're likely caused by some really intense chemical and electrical changes happening in a brain that's under extreme stress and, you guessed it, being deprived of oxygen. And that's pretty much where science hits a wall. But for literally billions of people around the world, this is not the end of the story. It's just the end of a single chapter. For them, death isn't an exit. It's a doorway into a whole new reality.
Yeah, religion offers a profoundly different perspective, one where death is just a transition. So in Islam, a brand new life called Akhirat begins. In Christianity, the soul continues its journey, heading to heaven or hell. And in Hinduism, the soul is seen as immortal and is reincarnated, born again into a new life. The details are all different, but the core idea is exactly the same. Something continues on.
Let's dive a little deeper into the journey described in Islam, because it's laid out in these really clear stages. First, there's barzakh, which is this sort of intermediate state, where the soul is questioned in the grave. That's followed by Qiyamah, or the Day of Judgment, when everyone is resurrected to be judged for their actions. And then comes the final step, the ultimate destination, Jannah, which is heaven for the righteous, or Jahannam, hell for the wicked.
Hinduism, on the other hand, is built around this amazing concept of reincarnation. The idea is that the soul is immortal. It just gets a new body after the old one dies. But here's the really interesting part. The kind of life you're born into isn't random. It's determined by karma, which is basically the sum of all your actions and intentions from your past life. Good karma means a better rebirth. Bad karma? Well, a tougher one. So when you boil it all down, what connects these different religious views is this single, incredibly powerful idea. For these faith traditions, death isn't a period at the end of the sentence. It's more like a comma, a pause before the next, and maybe the most important part of the story begins. It's the start of a whole new existence.
All right, so we've gone from the observable facts of science to the faith-based answers of religion. Now it's time to turn to our third perspective, philosophy. And philosophy doesn't really give us easy answers, but what it does is help us ask much better questions.
So philosophically, this whole debate often boils down to 2 big opposing ideas. On one side, you've got materialism. This lines up pretty well with science. The physical world is all there is. Brain dies, consciousness ends. Full stop. But on the other side, you've got dualism. This is the idea that your mind or your soul is actually separate from your physical body. For a dualist, the death of the body doesn't automatically mean the end of consciousness. But then you have some philosophers who just flip the whole conversation on its head. They argue that maybe we're asking the wrong question entirely. Maybe the point isn't what happens after we die, but how the absolute certainty of death changes how we live right now. And this quote just nails it. Knowing our time is limited is the very thing that makes our choices, our relationships, and our actions so incredibly valuable. And that right there, that brings us to the absolute heart of all of this. After exploring everything that might happen after life, what does it all mean for us during our life?
So what's the real truth? Well, the honest answer is, nobody knows for sure. Science can tell us what happens to our body. Religion gives us answers that are based on faith. And philosophy just encourages us to keep asking questions. There's just no universally provable answer out there.
And that massive uncertainty leads to a really powerful thought experiment. Just ask yourself this: what if there is an afterlife? And what if there isn't? How should we live our lives knowing that either one of those could be true?
And thinking about that leads to a pretty amazing conclusion. If there is an afterlife, then this life is our preparation, it's our test, it's the time to do good things. And if there isn't an afterlife, then this is it. This is our one shot to experience joy, to help people, to make a difference. In either case, this life, the one you're living right here, right now, becomes profoundly important.
So maybe the mystery of death isn't really about finding out what happens then. Maybe it's a giant signpost pointing us back to the questions that matter most now. Am I doing good deeds? Am I helping other people? Am I finding some kind of meaning in a time I have?
So, after this journey through science and religion and philosophy, we're left with one final, kind of poetic idea to think about. And perhaps that's the best way to look at it. Death is an unknown door. For some, it might be the final exit. For others, it's the entrance to a whole new beginning. And for many of us, it will always be the ultimate mystery. The only question left is, what do you think is on the other side?